And then when I left college, I started doing personal and private intuitive work, primarily through my forte, which at the time was the intuitive tool astrology. So that's one of the things I learned, and I learned it in a way and began to evolve it in a way that's very different than probably what most of you would think of as astrology, because for me it was archetypal, it was intuitive, it wasn't medieval where planets cause things to happen. It was looking at a synchronistic model of how our psyche is interconnected holographically to everything, and how everything unfolds in our lives through cycles. And if I say that, you guys you're all nodding your head like, yeah, duh. But you go try to convince a skeptic about the validity of astrology, and they would totally agree with my last statement, but not with anything else, when it's what you actually live. So I've always said astrology is what you actually live. It's not what you read in books and look up in your definitions of certain signs. So I could go on and on about that, and I don't want to have this become a diatribe on astrology. I want to bring that layer in, though, because Caroline touched on it today when she started talking about the astrological ages. So that would be a great point for us to jump in to you. And one of the things I've sort of evolved into through the complexity and sophistication of my skill set is how to see people holographically. And by that I mean, there are so many things that make you you. You would never be able to be conscious of all of them. When I do a reading on somebody, I'm actually profiling all the things that have made them them. Starting from the sacred contract, soul contract level of what you innately brought into life with you. You all brought something, you all feel that, right? Like you didn't just show up here tabula rasa and your parents and culture drew on you to become this or that. There was something innate. You guys had moments in your life where you just felt that something, which we oftentimes call the soul, right? And you all kind of feel like, my soul kind of made these agreements before being here. This was not some random birth on the planet. Well, you're right. So there is a design, there's an order to why you're here. And I want to just impress upon you that when you crossed from the energetic quantum field into form, you bound yourself to something called time. And no matter what these New Age books say about time being an illusion, it's real right now. We're all aging. We all got cycles of life unfolding as it should be. So in this realm, we experience time, but time also moves in cycles that are archetypal. So let me say it to you this way. Before all of you were born, there already were patterns managing reality before you came here. You all get that? Like you didn't just hop on the planet and suddenly the patterns went, oh, good, we're here. Your soul, if you could imagine, fused its energy into, if you will, the nervous system and psyche of the earth and its own evolutionary patterns, which are what I would call our fate. So you can't control those. Those are bigger than all of us. They're kind of like psychic weather patterns. They're kind of like the biology and DNA of the earth. It's going to unfold. It's going to do its thing, and it has its own programs, and it's going to unfold through cycles of time that none of us really, per se, can do much about. But we can learn about those cycles, and we can learn how to work empoweredly with them, in our power, with awareness. It's kind of like learning the weather forecast. So a lot of times, for me, the tool of astrology as an intuitive tool does just that. It shows me, if you look at it this way, archetypally, synchronistically, the psychic weather patterns of Earth School, and the various holographic nature of how the cycles are all interrelating and pulsing through you and me and everything. So when I look at you and see you as a hologram, I'm seeing so many factors, and as much as my capacity allows, because I can't see it all. But I am always guided to see what's most important to help my client and also give them the best wisdom and guidance and advice that I possibly can. Or if I'm teaching a class, to pick the layers that I know are going to ping and resonate with all of you in the most general yet specific way at the same time. Does it make sense to everybody? You tracking with me? Even though you're like, dude, it's been 10 hours. Who are you? So I'm an amalgam of many things. I am an astrologer, but an astrologer for a new era. I'm an intuitive, and similarly an intuitive for a new era. I guess you could say I'm somewhat psychic, whatever. A teacher, a guide. I love that archetype. And I'm all of it. So when I move from client to client or classroom to classroom, I kind of pull up for myself the best things that I think are going to be most helpful to you, and that's my intention tonight, is to be the most helpful and complementary to what Caroline's laying down for you. Let's jump in. Are you guys willing to do a little astrology first here? A little laying the tracks down of the hologram? Cool. So, of course, I was grooving on Caroline's lecture today in terms of her bringing in the astrological ages, because that's my lane. Starting with the age of Aries, you know, and I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of what the astrological ages are, and with the Greeks, and actually more than the Greeks, because here goes Professor Ohotto, get ready, do not fall asleep. Alexander the Great conquered all of Mesopotamia, all of these different lands in this big, like massive territory that had never been amalgamated before. And as a result, all of these different astrology systems combined. So you had the Sumerians, you had the Babylonians, you did have the Greeks, you had all these people with different systems, but they'd all been tracking the same night sky from different vantage points, and they all had different mythologies, but still represented, for the most part, the same archetypes. So if you go and do history, and I encourage you, I actually have a really robust article on my website about this, and go through the astrological ages starting from way back, age of Gemini, and move yourself forward. By the way, they go in reverse. I'm going to explain that in a minute. But you'll see that even though there wasn't the internet, and there wasn't even travel across the sea, they were all during the age of Taurus making pottery that looked like a bull. How did that happen? And then finally Carl Jung goes, yeah, it's called the collective unconscious, don't you know? So it's true, there is this psychic field that we're all intertwined with and connected to as part of the Earth psyche, because you're a celestial being, not an Earth being or cultural one. And when you're here, you're fused into that whole data system and its moving parts and its evolution and its history and its march forward. You can't underestimate how much that informs you, especially if you, actually it informs everybody in a way that can actually wound you. So in a patriarchal society, for example, women don't win clearly, right? But neither do men. We're taught to be cut off from the feminine half of our psyche, which is part of our own holism. And then we got to go bully each other to be more a man. We're not winning. We're losing. Everyone's losing in that imbalance. But this is just one example of the things that make you you, and how they inform your self-concept, your self-esteem, your capacity to stand up and use your voice. You guys know this, right? Because you're living it right now. So part of the journey in terms of these meta cycles that I'm going to go through real quick, which are the astrological ages, is understanding that we are born into a meta-dominant evolutionary pattern. That's not to say during the age of Aries there wasn't an activation of Piscean patterns. There was, but it wasn't the meta pattern. The meta pattern was Aries, and then it shifted to Pisces, and right now we're in an age shift from Pisces to Aquarius. And there's a lot of debate in astrology. I'm just going to give you my point of view. We're not actually in the age of Aquarius yet. We're in the transitional bridge. And in every era, as part of the meta patterns, there are dominant archetypal forces that activate in culture, that become part of the culture's rituals, part of the culture's art, part of the culture's family systems, patriarchal, matriarchal, part of how people learn, part of how people perceive. And that's what Caroline was showing you today was, in that first, her model of how she broke up the chakra system. In that age, the first 3 chakras were dominant chakras. Not that the other ones weren't there or active somehow, but they weren't the dominant ones. So I would call the age of Aries, it was an age of fate. It's a time when you're just there's not a lot of room to pivot as an individual in conscious choice. You're tribal. And tribes are kept together by something Caroline mentioned today, and that's law. This is in everybody's system, and it's still in your system today. These are active forces in you today. The difference now, because we have transitioned to the age of Pisces, is that we went from outer law, and Caroline's going to cover this even more, to inner law. We moved from the survival tribal laws to inner individuation law, which that's a big word too, I know. It means become an individual. It's a Jungian word, like to individuate means you become you, fully expressed, capable of free will, conscious choice. So in the age of Pisces, As Jesus, Buddha, some of the great teachers of that era taught, it was a journey into internal assessment and internal coordinate and centering and power. And to get there, one of the teachings you had to engage was forgiveness, because if you don't engage forgiveness, you don't get access to there. You stay tribal. Eye for an eye, Hammurabi's code. You guys with me? Now, I want to just say that these ages are determined, they're 2,160 years in length, and the whole tour of them is called the Platonic year. And how they are determined is by something called the Procession of Equinoxes. Who's glazing over going, who, what? I know it makes my head hurt to teach it, but I'm going to do it. So the Procession of Equinoxes is created by, this is the Earth, this is its axis, and because we got the M here is the moon. It's my little moon. And the moon pulls on the Earth, and the Earth's axis, if you can imagine like this, over a space of time does this. And so our orientations to the stars change. And then it comes back to where it was. That whole loop is a whole tour through all the astrological ages. So it's just about our orientation to when the equinoxes happen and what constellation we're looking at when that happens. You guys get it? Oh my God, really? Oh my God, I'm good. And if you didn't, don't worry. It's really about just laying down that there is an actual science to how they track these cycles. So what the ancients were doing, all of them, I'm just going to lump them all together like Alexander did, I'll amalgamate them, is that they started to watch the sky and watch life. And in my language, they began to track the hologram. And they started to see, wow, when Mars is over there, and at that exact alignment, there seems to be a lot of war. Or Venus, or when Saturn's doing this, kings die. Because back then, it was really the royalty or the heads of state that got the astrology charts done. Most common people didn't. You looked and saw eclipses and stuff and got scared and whatever, but no one really had that sophistication to understand that they were hanging their psyches on the stars. They were tracking fundamental forces of creation here on Earth and their timing and their cycles. And they did a brilliant job. So what drew me to astrology wasn't that it sounded cool in New Age. I'm a pretty grounded guy. But that I watched, just like they did, my own chart, my own cycles, my clients, and things happened like a clock. So since some of you are new, I'm going to tell you my Joe story. You guys ready? We need a story up in here about right now, right? Okay. So I'm in Seattle, 24 years old, kicking it like an astrologer. It's about how good it was, too, by the way. And I started doing charts for clients. And I had a natural talent. I was really good with it, but I was really young. I didn't have a maturity to back it up. And this one guy walks into this coffee shop, and I had a bunch of astrology charts in front of me. And he sits down kind of by me, and he's seemed peeking over at me. And suddenly we strike up a conversation. He's an actor. His name is Joe. And we start talking about dreams. And at the time, I had this, in astrology, we call it transit. It's when you have a planet activating your psyche in a certain way, archetypally. And I'd been having a Pluto one. So I was having lots of dreams of Scorpios singing me, which is very Pluto. It's part of its archetype of death, regeneration, rebirth, death, regeneration, rebirth. And for me, that would make sense. I study this stuff. I'm immersed in symbols and mythology. Well, Joe spontaneously starts telling me about his dreams about scorpions stinging him. And I'm like, Joe, when's your birthday? We had the same birthday. And I had a Carl Jung moment of wow, there really is the collective unconscious. Wow. I'm going to snort some more astrology. This is great. So, or was it astrology? But I'm just making sure you're awake. This is all to keep you awake. So my point is you really are in this field, and it still astounds me, the organization of it, the timing of it, the precision of it. I mean, I do online cycles now a lot of the time where I'll take a big cycle, or sometimes a Mercury retrograde like we're in one now, y'all. Ends tomorrow. But anyway, so I track these things, and I come up with the main veins, and I sort of intuit the main things that I think most people are going to be challenged by, and then teach how to get through that and how to work with it. So every cycle is going to bring chaos. because that's part of, as the Greeks would say, how we get to new things. Things have to go into a state of chaos first, right? The chaos is the genesis of all things new, whether we like it or not. So every age is going to bring that as well. But the ages, these meta cycles, go for a long time, a long, long time. So we've transitioned already, and we're let's just say we're here now. We're in the entry point to Aquarius. Now, Pisces was a lot about the teach. If you just know some of the archetypal flavor of Jesus's teachings, Buddha's teachings, it's a great point to dive into a lot of what that archetype was about. And it was about waking up to your inner senses and going inside and reorganizing your power from just a survival, combat, kind of tribal space, and then seeing what could happen out of that. So it's also, one could say, a journey out of the wounded survival ego into the healing waters of the soul. And that back then looked like religion for the most part. Most mystical entry points were religious in structure. But now, in the age of Aquarius, as we're heading into this age, as you all know, hello headlines, that whole religious container has disintegrated greatly. And I suspect that there's a danger in that because, I grew up Catholic, and not that I was always jiving with their fire and brimstone going to hell stuff, but they did at least often have a true north of service back when I was a kid. We would have community food drives, we'd care about people, we would do stuff that cohesed the community into some form of help to others, which is, a lot of what Mother Teresa embodied and other saints embodied. And without religion, what coheses us now into service with each other? Nothing. You want to know I'm right? Go take a trip on Twitter and write something political and watch your world blow up in like a second with the most hateful things you could even imagine people would even say, or Facebook. So we are in an era where we are somewhat godless, and yet at the same time waking up to being multisensory. Both are true. You guys with me? Still want to keep going down this rabbit hole? Okay, so this is you now. Now, in every age, a new pantheon of archetypes becomes part of the meta pattern. So Aquarius is about humanity. It is the archetype and mythology of one world consciousness. Now, track with me. It's not that we've never been one world. We've always been one world. The difference now is we know it. We know it. We know it through our technology. The internet changed everything. Air travel changed everything. Trade changed everything. It's a one world economy. It's a one world everything. And let me just say something. This is a pattern greater than anybody. Anyone who wants to fight this pattern will be crushed by it. You either align to these cycles and go, this is the beauty of understanding a cycle, and going, okay, this will be a little chaotic because we're going to become one world. But that's the true north now. Joseph Campbell talked about this in his own monomyth work, that the end game is, the new myth emerging is you're one world. How are you going to live that way? When you've got different religions that clash, you've got corrupt governments, you got the headlines of today. Sum it up that way. Parties at war with each other politically. And yet this is going to happen. It's already happened. Walk around your living room and look and see where everything was made. By the time you're done with that list, you'll have toured the whole world. You'll have been to India, you'll have been to China, Malaysia, Pakistan, right? The computers you guys use, where are those made? Right? So this is a technological truth, but it's also a mystical one. The supreme mystical truth that the age of Pisces sent to open a door for is that we are all one. And the age of Aquarius is how do we live that way through vision, humanitarianism, and ideals. Those are all Aquarian archetypes. Meanwhile, in 1977, a new archetype comes on the scene when Chiron, which is we call it a planetoid, because it's too small to be a planet but too big to be an asteroid, was discovered. And in every time that there's a new planet discovered in astrology, it blows my mind how they're named, by the way, because they're so spot on in synchronicity, but I shouldn't be surprised by now. But Chiron's named, and that is the wounded healer. How many of you are familiar with the wounded healer pattern? You all should be, because you all have it or you wouldn't be in this room. It's a dominant force in all of your development now. It first came on the scene in the 70s as therapy. Do you guys remember when therapy became kind of less hush-hush and more like, who's your therapist? Mine's blah, blah, blah. And of course, we first went to our child archetype with that and explored all our shitty parenting, didn't we? Right? Which is appropriate to begin the journey of healing. You got to understand where your wounds come from. Now, how many of you, and I really mean this, I want you to raise your hands, have ever took an inventory of how culture has wounded you? Very well, that's pretty good. Not everybody, though. Have you ever thought, how'd culture wound me? Because that's a Chiron question. This is an age of an Aquarius question. How'd society wound me? And by wound, let me be more specific. Let's go with one of the major inflictors of this wound, and that's shame. How many of you have struggled with your shame? This is a shame-based culture, of course you have. And shame, let me define that. It's a statement, an externalized voice that says, you know what? There's actually something inherently wrong with you. And you better pray to Jesus, baby girl, if you want to be enough. And that's where we call original sin. I call it original shame. It's indoctrinated in our whole culture, through even our religious traditions. That by the time you were screwed at birth, game over. So you all have been wounded by culture in some way. We all have. And the common inflictor of that wound I can name is shame. So how does shame change you, shape you? How does it become identity? And that's the key. Do you guys have a sense of how it's become your identity? Now imagine this. So Chiron, let me go back to him for a minute. He is a centaur. He's half mortal, half immortal. The lower half of him, the horse part of him, is the mortal part of him. He was born from Kronos and Philyra, this nymph. And Philyra was so horrified by how he turned out, she didn't want to have anything to do with him. Kronos ran off and tried to find Zeus, didn't give a crap. So he's abandoned, he's orphaned. Track with me, that's a big archetype, the orphan archetype. Now, track with me again. If you're going to move into becoming an individual, what are you going to really do? You will orphan yourself tribally. You see, I'm naming the pattern of development each of you are already in. So, but guess what you get if you become an orphan? You get to now define your own reality. It is no longer tribally defined for you. That is the gate and the key out of tribal reality. Into what? Intuitive perception. You guys with me? So Chiron as an archetype in your psyche, in your life, is massive. It's one of the most dominant forces in all of you right now. And it is about learning that, yeah, you know what? There's two truths in me. One's an Aries truth, one's a Pisces truth. Aries truth, I'm mortal. I've got to survive. I need survival archetypes. I need survival patterns. And it also means I do need tribe. You're never really out of tribalism. Because at the end of the day, you're still part of the tribe of humanity. It's such a paradox, isn't it? I would say there's conscious tribalism and unconscious tribalism, and that's the key. The tribalism, and the new definition of tribalism is this, and it's an Aquarian one. In the age of Aries, and to some degree age of Pisces, to be part of the tribe and to keep the tribe going, you had to give up individuality to be part of the tribe, right? In the age of Aquarius, we say, no, actually now, you need to be so unique, standing in your individuality, in your genius, to save the tribe. So a lot of you might have something activated in your life. A chaotic cycle is alive. And if I could break it down for you, I could say, well, that chaotic cycle, its intention is to detribe you. But then a lot of times when people detribe, they go to the victim immediately. Look what my tribe did to me. And that's a natural progression of detribing. But at some point, you're going to have to realize, how useful is this to stay in this archetype? What else you got? And then Chiron comes in and says, I'm going to apprentice you in shamanic consciousness. I'm going to teach you how to walk between two worlds, whether that's a tribe and individuality is two worlds, whether that's this realm of manifestation and the energetic psychic realm is two worlds. across the board, the both and becomes now your new way to live. So you're both mortal and immortal. Both are true. Do you guys get this? I want you to track in your lives right now, just real quick. Where are you in either or? And how's that working for you? Is that keeping wounds alive? Is it keeping you stuck? From now on, you approach every situation, I wonder what the both and might be. Because this is the Chiron shamanic consciousness that you're under sacred contract to mature through now. And then what happens is, so we have fate archetypes in age of Aries, we have soul archetypes in age of Pisces, and I'm going to say we have destiny archetypes in age of Aquarius. It's where they both meet and you get down to business of changing fate to destiny. Someone wrote a book about that. I think it was me. Chiron is about realizing that, you know what? What's true, you're both wounded and healing. Both are true. Both are truths that will be alive in you forever. The final story of Chiron's journey is that he's wounded in his leg by a poison arrow from Hercules' bow, and Hercules was his friend. They were going to settle this dispute between the centaurs and men because they used to fight all the time, and it broke into a war. And in the battle, Hercules accidentally shot him. Check off the word, accidentally. It was not personal. Cultural wounds are not personal. They're part of a greater pattern. But they feel personal. So part of the engaging of the healing is to realize you've got wounds that have nothing to do with you. And there's so much paradox in this archetype, it's delicious. And that's how you'll heal. So Chiron realizes, he tries to heal this poison in his, because this is mortal, this is all immortal. This is trying to die, this won't let him die. So he's in this perpetual state of agony. Kind of sounds like my life. So he ends up saying to Hercules, look, dude, you better go talk to your dad Zeus and get me out of this, because you put me here and I just want to die now. This is a joke. So Hercules goes to Zeus, said, can you just let him go to Hades and take the place of someone else? Because you always took someone else's place in Hades. You didn't just go down there and, someone had to pop up. So they let Prometheus go. Chiron goes down, totally dies. And Zeus is like, you gave up your whole immortality? That's so weird. I can't deal with this. I'm going to make you completely immortal in the constellation of the sky of Centaurus. Done. And the point is, part of your healing in this new age is you have to be okay with your wounds may never heal. And ironically, if you get to that place of release and surrender, then they heal. Right? I've got this pattern. I'm just going to surrender that it's just never going to heal. Boom, it shifts. Try it out. Chiron medicine. But my point is, the other thing I want to mention here is this is about being multisensory. Chiron was of two worlds. He was of the world of energy, and if you will, the gods. And he's also of the world of being mortal. And so are you. So becoming multisensory, I just want to really language that real quick because I think it's fantasized a lot, and it's actually not all that. It's really about opening up to a new bandwidth of perception, which, track with me, that means you feel more of the world. You want some of that? So it's not like I'm multisensory, aren't I special? I get to see through walls. No, now you actually get a psychic wave of Syria in your system on any given day, and it flattens you just like you lost a loved one. There will be times now in your new multisensory bandwidth where you cannot locate why you're sad or angry or anxious because it's not yours. Your system's bandwidth now opens and perceives a new spectrum of the world. That's what multisensory abilities really do. And if you don't have an anchoring in shamanic consciousness or inner mystical work, you'll get blown out. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Good. So I just want to name that all of this is part of where we are now. We are in this, so all of us were born, check this out, we were all born in this shift. Your whole lifetime will be in this shift. I know y'all want different soul contracts, too late. But you're going to be in this for the rest of your life. So will I. And you are the sort of the first chironic generation that's going, wait a minute, I think both and is the best medicine, not either or. I think I'm going to find the inner coordinate and true north here in this situation, not just rely on survival reaction. I think I'm going to stop living through cultural wounds and cultural DNA and family DNA that's handed down to me psychically that directs my self-concept, my self-esteem, what I choose, how I feel about myself, blah, blah, blah. So when I read you, I see all that. I see the profile of every force in your system that I'm going to be helpful with in that moment of reading you and what it's doing and how you've adapted. I call them survival adaptations to certain things in your life to survive. So how many of you have wrestled with the codependent pattern? Right? That's a survival adaptation. And what it is you, when you were a child, you might have also been born more open and sensitive. You would go and want to feel other people so you could figure out, possibly fueled by shame or inadequacy or abuse you'd been through or whatever, but you wanted to figure out, how can I be enough to survive this family? How can I be enough to survive this teacher in school? How can I be enough to not be shamed during church on Sunday? That is codependency. I must leave my center and myself to go track someone else to get back to my own safety, security, and survival. I am dependent on how I manage them to get back to me. And it's not right, wrong, good, or bad. It's kind of brilliant software when you're a kid. But when you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, maybe not, 70, 80, anybody? So this work that Caroline is guiding you through this weekend, and one interpretation I would offer is how do you go to the internal world of your feng shui and rearrange furniture so that the codependent isn't the door greeter. So that you have other ways of flowing through someone doesn't like you, someone blah, blah, blah. And you don't have to leave yourself to go manage them. They can be okay with their own experience of you. And you can just rest in your center. It's about getting on your throne and owning that center. You guys with me? All right. So we flip the page. So destiny archetypes are developmental. Soul archetypes, for me, you came in with. I came in with the teacher. I was teaching when I was in my diapers. This is how you put it on. Don't go for Huggies, they're bad for kids. But you have archetypes that you have a soul contract to develop with. And if I were to go astrological with you, that is what your sun sign is. It's not what you innately are necessarily, it's what your soul signed up to develop with. Who's sun and Leo in here? Oh, now you're not going to raise your hand. I will read you. Oh, yes, I will. I will come down and read every single one of you. Whatever your sun sign is, you guys know what that is? Come on, it's Astrology 101. So when you read the paper, and you're going and looking at the dates that mark Leo, like something like July 22nd to August 22nd, your sun sign's Leo. You guys with me? You guys read your cosmos. Oh, please. Come on. That means your sun sign is Leo, and if you're on a cusp, you got to get your chart done to know for sure. But that is the dominant pattern your soul signed up to work with to develop your consciousness and who you are in this life. Does that make sense? I could go in, yeah. Damn that Scorpio sun. I hate that Libra sun, always trying to find balance and compromise my value. I'm possessive and I'm a Scorpio and I hate that sun. Okay. Let's talk about the holographic nature of cycles. Now you guys want to go through all the sun signs, or I could perform them, actually. We'd be here. If you start sleeping, I will. I'll just pick a sign. I'll do my psychic inner spin wheel and be like, Capricorn, okay. So we've covered. I can't even. Now I feel delirious because of you guys. I'm feeling your like delirium from the day. The holographic nature of cycles. Okay. All cycles are holographic as well. I mean, this is the thing that blows when you start to really understand multisensory bandwidth and the true nature of reality. It's like, why bother? Going back to 2D, I'm done. But metacycles of Earth's evolution, those are in motion all the time. They're the tectonic, real heavy dominant patterns, and they move real slow through really like the whole Earth and everyone on it. Now we're going to get more specific, all right? And I'm going to teach you a couple things about yourself. So you're part of that. We covered that. We got Aries, Pisces, and Aquarius, and we got Chiron all up in it, right? You guys are with my Chiron, right? Now, you then break into what I call generational cycles. And these can span, I'm just going to give you a rough estimate, these can be 30 years long. You can be part of a generation that carries an archetypal imprint. And that can span up to 30 years, and it can be as small as 7 or 10. So you're born in generational energy, but what you may not have known is that you're also fused to an archetypal pattern in that generation that's part of your archetypal generational sort of clause in your soul contract. Right? Then you get down into social cycles. So, and a lot of times you can see, like, this is what they call zeitgeist, right? This whole area here, the zeitgeist of the times. That's more social cycles. Generational is like different eras, the 40s. We should go by decades. The truth is, they're not as clean as a decade. Their baby boomers spanned far further. That's a generational archetype right there. You guys are Pluto and Leo generation. Now, then you get into social cycles, which are a little smaller. And then you get into family cycles, and then you get into your own personal cycles, and all of it affects you. That's what it means to be holographic here. All of it matters. All of it is moving through you, activating in your psyche, and it's like clockwork. It is. So how many of you have just been through or in or have experienced, I'm sure you're all going to raise your hands, but it's rhetorical, whatever. Been through like a dark night cycle, and you knew it had a time. And it hit like a clockwork. And you're like, God, this just feels like a bad psychic storm blowing through my life. What gives, right? How many have had that? We just intuitively knew this is connected to a timeline. And this is the descent. This isn't even the bottom yet. There ain't no light coming. I'm in the descent. You guys know what I'm talking about? You feel me? Okay. This is a dark night cycle. And let me tell you what I mean by dark night, because it's been used in different ways in mysticism, and I'm not exactly referring to maybe more of a mystical John of the Cross approach to this, although I don't think it's exclusive of that, but I look at things like a technician, just how I'm wired. So a dark night cycle is about some part of your life, whether that's on the next chart, identity, whether that's relationships, whether that's family, whether that's your role to the public, i.e. career calling. Some part of your ego, your identity, how you express through that into the world is scheduled to die. And it's not because you're an original piece of sin, you piece of crap. It's because you were meant to become more. Woo! That's what I'm talking about. Can I get an amen? So you were meant to become more, but the more technically can't coexist in the same space of the you now. Why? Because the you now is run by the codependent. And if your more is to be a CEO, entrepreneur of a company, and the codependent's driving that ship, you're going to crash. You're going to be going around to every employee. Do you like me? Can you do something to make you like me? Okay, are you okay over here? Okay. I don't know if I'm going to get to making choices for the company today, but are you okay? Or the adult child. Or the adult child, right? How can I parent you best in this company? How could I be a mommy or daddy to you? What do you need, a kiki? Okay, right back. I'll get around to running the company later. I got it. See what I'm saying? Instead of the king or queen or the entrepreneur, it's like, grow up if you want to be in this company. I don't have time for this. We got shit to do. Do you see? So that person would go through the dark night of the codependent. And it would, whatever part of your life that the codependent has co-created is going to go into a state of chaos. And that's when we find that 2x4, right? How does that usually show up? Well, I can name many readings I've done. It's shown up as someone cheating on their spouse, a betrayal, a job loss, kids betraying their own parents. Whatever it takes to get you to step out of the codependent as the way you manage your safety, security, and survival into something new. And for all of us, that'll be, whatever it takes will be different. It might be a complete gutting out of your life. It might be, as you're learning in medical intuition, a disease that hits you. Whatever the gods think will get you into that new thing. So dark night cycles, when they come, you should be like, hallelujah, my life's going to change. But here's the trick. Can I get another amen? One more. Do you guys get, anyone not tracking? Because we're going to thread it out. You all with me? Yeah. Sure.
Can you avoid that dark night of the soul if you get on it and take care of it yourself?
I love your question. And my next reflections is all about that question, by the way. I know y'all going to take it. I'll see you in September. Yes, well, let me say it this way. I don't think you can avoid a dark night, but you can change how dark it gets and how long it lasts. Dark nights are scheduled, though. I mean, but you can, this is why I'm doing this class. Caroline and I were talking this summer. I was at her house. We were both teaching at Celebrate Your Life together, and not together, but we were both there teaching, and we were talking about dark cycles, because clearly it's a relevant topic right now. And because the thing that I want you to understand is that dark night doesn't just happen to you. It happens to a whole culture. It happens to a whole country. It happens to a whole state. It can happen to the oceans. It can happen to the forests in California that are burning up. Or here. We're here. Geez. It can happen to anything. It can happen to a collective. It can happen to a group. It can happen to anything. And I want to say something about that because, I think the tendency nowadays is to think that choosing one political party over another will ward it off. And actually, karma's karma. Contracts are contracts. You actually cannot negotiate this with tribalism or political ideologies. Dark nights come. They don't care which party you're part of. They just they're kind of a karmic technical force that comes into your life and says, okay, these patterns are not sustainable anymore for what you're meant to become. It's just that simple. And now, this is why we all will freak out and it'll get really dark, is because if not that, what we've known, then what? And there's something, and it's so crucial as you move through a dark night, you have to ask yourself a few questions. One, what is my relationship like with the unknown? Two, am I willing to become nobody? Can I be nobody? Can I deactivate an archetype that has created many facets of my life and my identity in those facets? Can I deactivate that? And in the dark is the surrender point where you go, I'm willing to be nobody. And so what we try to do, and self-help books and spirituality books, they encourage this crap, just saying, is we try to use the old self to figure out how to stop the dark night when it's the old self that's scheduled to die. So you're like, well, I just want to get back to my old self and I want to get out of this. And and the universe is like, really? Crank the shades a bit more. We need a little more dark in here. Send that sun down. It's not dark enough yet. Girl, you know it's true. So, or how about the drug commercials? I just want to get back to my old self. As if that's what healing is. You're never going to get back to your old self. That was all fucked up. Why do you want to go back there? No. Instead of, that's done. I don't know what's next, but amen. And that's, I can say it that way, but as you guys already know, it's not that easy. When you've built a marriage around a pattern, the way you raised your kids around a pattern, your role to your society, your community around that pattern, it's not that easy, is it? That's why some people will die before they'll change. They will die, or they'll take others out with them before they'll change, because they don't know how to be anything else. So this is where true spiritual practice hits the grid of life. This is where you go in, as Caroline's going to guide you over the next few days, a couple days, and you figure out, what is it in me that has to activate to sustain being nobody? Until I get the new software, the new archetypes online, that now can take it from here. You guys with me? You can be in all of these, and they matter. They matter. So I think a lot of what I saw happening in like around 2008, 2009, when the whole world crashed economically because of us, is a lot of people started to buy into these different spiritual philosophies that they could create their own reality and sort of vision board their way out of this, and it doesn't work that way. Technically, it just doesn't work that way. You can't do that. When you have a bigger fate of the culture hitting you and affecting you, the fires here, we have your smoke in Colorado right now. I see it every day. I go out in Boulder and run around. We're that connected now. Your fires are my fire. And that's what's true. But I can't sit there and vision board today, no smoke in the sky. Really? So that's why you want to know about your hologram. You want to know, okay, well, what's going on? And I've worked with Fortune 500 companies, and a lot of times my role to them is to map the psychic weather. Like, I don't think you want to be launching your product during this time because I feel something coming up in the patterns of the culture. They're not going to make it very good for you. They're going to steal the headline. So I'd wait a year, or I'd wait till this time. You guys see what I mean? So knowing this, that dark night cycles, they're chaotic. Meaning they break down and disorganize you to eventually reorganize you around a new center of power, new archetypal forces. Or maybe it's to shift the expression of one that's already running your show. It just needs to become a different expressed you. Do you guys have any questions about that? I feel like there's a couple questions. Yeah. Like a dark night? I like the idea of disintegration more, because there's something about, and I've learned this in human systems reading people, that if you approach yourself with resistance or purging has a violence to it, the idea of like, I think it's more about things returning to an elemental state, into nothing, and then recombining and reorganizing into something else. That totally love that word. Yeah, because purge is, I'm just very specific with language, and because I know that we use language a lot of times, it's based on a sense of tug of war with ourselves. How many of you have done that? Like you've had a pattern, you just want to get that codependent out of here, right? Or addict, or perfectionist, or whatever it is, and you're being perfectionist with your perfectionist. So they ain't going anywhere for part one, You know what I mean? So you got to be, and this is where you really do enter into mysticism. You enter into a state of what is so irrational to the human logical mind, where your human logical mind says, throw that up, honey, purge. And the mystic in you goes, just let it all go. There's nothing to purge. You're already enough. Just nothing to get rid of. You're just, that's why I use the word deactivate an archetype. You never really get rid of that wiring. By the way, that's even true in terms of neuroscience. Once it's wired in your brain, that wiring is there for life. Whether it is activated and dominating the way your circuitry works in your brain is another story. So if I don't speak French or German for a while, and then I go back to France or Germany, there's a few days where it's like, and then things come online again, right? Because that wiring is still there, I just haven't used it in that more everyday fluent way. So, you guys ready for the next layer? Okay, we're killing it. So, you guys are cool, you're down with the holographic nature of your cycles? Now, let's talk about dark cycles of chaos and challenge. So, I know a lot of what you've been covering, and how many of you actually came to this weekend because of a health issue or something that was in your health in some form or other that you wanted a more, Caroline's genius to kind of touch into? Okay, great. And that is a part of a dark cycle. And I can't speak to, that's Caroline's lane, and I know mine. So she knows that stuff like crazy, and just how that energy anatomy works within health and wellness and stuff. What I know is how cycles work generally in every area of your life, including health. But I don't know the specifics like Norm and Caroline would teach you around the breakdown of tissue and whatnot and what might cause it. Obviously, sometimes you get cancer because you live next to Chernobyl. And sometimes you get it because you have unresolved anger. And it just depletes your cell tissue into a tipping point where that's your dark night of chaos. But cycles of chaos and challenge can hit any area of your life. And oftentimes, depending on what they're really hitting, though, what I want to teach you, is they're hitting a pattern. You guys get with me? So if that pattern happens to be something that affects your health or affects your relationships or affects your marriage or affects your single life or whatever it affects, that's what the darkness will start to touch into. Make sense? And a lot of times people that come to me for readings, they're coming, not out of curiosity, certainly, I'm too expensive, but they come because shit's getting real, right? Things are getting dark and they can't see. And you know what, honestly, you really can't see it for yourself. You're better served, that's where you would call on a spiritual director, as Caroline would teach you, or a really good therapist if that's kind of what's going to help the dark night, or both. Or a real good intuitive counselor that can guide you into and out of that. You need someone that's not ran by the same patterns that create your reality and that can see you objectively and go, I can see the reality and the dimensions you create through these patterns, and I can see what's scheduled for chaos and disintegration and deactivation. And I'm going to help you start to hear the whisper of what wants to activate next. Because it's already in your contract, by the way. It's already there. So they can hit your identity, family, and by that I also mean all of your entire family history, your relationships with other people, your role to society. And as Caroline was giving you that image of the building today. You guys remember that image, and how like the first floor only contains so much power and choice and self-connection, and then if you want, and is ran by certain patterns, and then you start to go up the levels, and then things get different, the view gets different, perspective gets different, and different patterns come online. So the dark night moves you up. That's what it does. Another way of looking at it through what she taught today is it starts to move you through the building. So the view gets more clear. And once you start to understand, like a technician, how a dark night rolls, the next one isn't so bad. You kind of go, this is a dark night, and I know better than to get my old self active to try to get myself out of this, because that's what's scheduled to go, deactivate. I'm going to have to go in. And I don't know who will be in my life once I come out. You don't know that. It's not till death do you part, it's till soul contract do you part, okay? Right? I'm going to relanguage what you said in a way that has power in it, because there's some victim energy in what you just said. With all of my heart, I tell you that. Because a lot of people I will, certainly, when the next dark night comes, the victim gets triggered all the time. I mean, you guys have had, right, you're going to be like, here it is again. Why me? Right? And that's okay. I mean, never make that wrong. It's part of what you're really feeling. It's part of the process also. They suck a lot of the time. But the truth is, on a more mystical, muscle plane, it's building you up to do some different heavy lifting for your destiny. It's like, sort of a boot camp. But I've never saw charts as, ooh, this is a challenge chart. This one's got it easy this life. I've never seen that actually be true for anybody. We all get hit. I think the chart does show timing. So you all have your own unique timing, pulling the astrology language out. You all have your own timing on some levels to dark nights. But let's take, for example, a world war. That's a dark night for a culture, if not the world now. And I don't care where you live, it's going to hit you in some way, especially if your bandwidth is open in a multisensory, expansive way. It doesn't matter if it's in Iraq or Syria or Yemen or the Congo. It's for all intents and purposes, my dear mystics, it's happening to you in your living room. You know what I'm saying? I'm being extreme, but to make a point, because this is the nature of how the new Aquarian patterns ask us to orient to power, to our relationship, to the holographic nature of life, and to our call, our calling. Your destiny and your calling are about serving other people, folks. And it's doing it through your genius, your contracts to grow. It all always comes back to the whole. Knowing your chart is only helpful in understanding the archetypes and the activations of those archetypes at play, and it's genius for that. But I caution anyone to ever empower yourself through victim consciousness in a dark night. You won't get far. It'll get real dark. And I said this before. It's like, so I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. A lot of times, because of the astrology work that I've done in the past, people have come to me and said, Robert, when is the cycle over? Dude, really? 6 months, 9, 3, tomorrow? And it'd be like you going to your orthodontist and having crooked teeth and getting braces on and walking in every day and going, when do I get my braces off? And your teeth are all crooked and your orthodontist is like, when your teeth are straight, are you crazy? Just wait. We got to move stuff around, right? So we approach dark nights the same way, like, when is this over? And then the other thing I want to offer, the paradox of this, is the alchemy that happens in a dark night to you, the part of you that eventually disintegrates, it no longer has a voice in your head once you're in the, that midnight point. So by that time, it's not even a dark night anymore. You see what I'm saying? Like, what dark night? That codependentism driving my life into the wall. So then suddenly, the next thing that starts to happen is the universe in its compassion sends you, and you guys, you are sent guides, angels, synchronicities, everything you need in a dark night. You will not be sent something to keep the old alive, but you will be sent something, in whatever form it shows up, that directs you to the next true north. Most of us spend our time in the dark night trying to keep the old alive. Why aren't you helping me keep the old alive, God? I don't want the angel of the new. I want the one that brings back Lazarus. Lazarus rose from the dead, y'all. I don't know if you know that, but just a little Catholic humor. So, reaching into the oldies but goodies here. I'm just trying to keep you awake. So there's something about the dark cycles of chaos where it doesn't even feel chaotic anymore. It's like, what's chaotic? The crazy is out of my life. It's out of my head. I refunctionated my living room. Now I can kind of sit back and do a little Colorado chill and whatever else I want to do. And California chill. So part of me wants to say, don't make the focus about when it's over. Make the focus about, in the prayer, what needs to change in me so that this dark isn't dark anymore. And then before you know it, how many of you have had that experience of coming through that dark journey and the sun starts to rise, and before you know it, I call these synchronicities of destiny. They start to line up one by one. Doors open that you couldn't have strategized on your best day. You had nothing to do with them other than, you know what you did? You aligned. You didn't manifest them. You aligned. You just went, okay. I'm just saying. You align to something, and then it really is about activation and alignment, in my experience. And not to say that you can't ask for help, because you really don't get through them, in my experience, alone. And you really need a good therapist, guide. I love the guide archetype, because what the guide does, check this out. The guide doesn't do anything but hold presence for your process for the most part. They watch your process unfold, and they give counsel when asked. They don't tell you what to do. It's your alchemy, not theirs. But they hold presence, unconditional presence. And I want you to understand that when you're in a dark night, just like an alcoholic getting sober or an addict getting sober, you will relapse. It's part of the process. Is there any usefulness in beating the crap out of yourself for that? No. What if your dark nights with your perfectionist? I've had a few of those. There's probably one coming up tomorrow. And then you're beating yourself up because you're not doing something perfectly. But that's not the aim. It's progress, not perfection, as they say in AA. It's about a journey and having help and support for those that are vested in the light, that aren't going to sit there and hold the history over your head that's trying to die. And that's a lot of times why you will leave groups of friends, you will leave people, because a lot of times people freeze you, they Botox you into an identity. Girl, it's true. Can I get an A to the men? So, right, they Botox you into this version of you that works well on their map of reality. Do not make me redraw my map of reality just because you became someone else, and because it's inconvenient to them, it oftentimes makes them look at their own worlds as flat map. And the thing is, everyone's entitled to their experience of your truth and of your journey, but that doesn't mean you have to manage it. You don't have to manage that anymore. You just manage you. Do you. Do you. Yes, question all the way in the back. Okay. What was the question? I'm teasing. Yes, Caroline was so brilliant. That's one of the things I loved about her sacred contracts model, was the identifying of her 4 survival archetypes. I want to be careful not to go into material some of you may have not studied, so I'd be speaking another language and kind of keep it more general. But in her model of sacred contracts that she identified through readings, you have 4 primary forces in your psyche that help you survive. And it's true. I see it a little differently, but I loved that. And the child archetype in us is the way that we first meet life, because we were all first children. So everyone's got a child archetype. Now, I think when it comes to your power, let's just tie it into a dark night cycle, because all those survival archetypes in a dark night cycle are going to get activated, all of them. So you're going to be asking yourself through the prostitute, how are you going to survive financially? How are you going to survive, how are you going to sell to get through this life? We all got to sell. Then you're going to ask through your child, am I safe? Am I secure? Am I protected? Are people going to abandon me? Abandonment is the primal fear of children, far more than any other fear. That's why children will lie to social services about their abusive parents versus tell the truth, because they're afraid their parents will abandon them or will be taken out of the home. They'd rather stay in a home where someone beats the shit out of them instead of actually tell the truth. That is a force in everyone. So acknowledging that as a voice in a dark night cycle is crucial. Then you've got the saboteur. I look at the saboteur differently in this sense that we each have a unique way of sabotaging ourselves. So for some of you, it might be your addict. For some of us, like me, it might be my perfectionist, procrastinator. And that might vary situation to situation, dark night to dark night. You might face a different part of that saboteur in you. So I just take it into a little more specificity and then name it through another archetype for me and for clients when I'm working with them. Does that make sense to everybody? So everyone's got these 4 forces in them, and they will all come up. Did I name them all? Did I miss one? I feel like I missed one. The prostitute. I kind of did the victim earlier. So the victim's another one as well. And these are just forces that, you can't pull off a destiny if you're dead. Just saying. So you got to have something in you or some things in you that propel survival. And there's no kumbayaing out of that, or beating pillows out of that, or vision boarding out of that. Yeah, I had to throw the vision board. You know how I roll. You know, you gotta have gritty ass archetypes that want to get dirty and get down to survival. Now the difference in a dark night cycle is how are they doing that unconsciously in ways that are not serving your potential anymore. The child archetype, what does it need? It needs good inner parents. I call them your mystical parents. So you have to learn how to parent yourself. Stop looking to the next mommy and daddy and the next person you're going to marry or go on a date with. I always ask people, what archetype went on the date tonight? Did you go looking for sugar daddy? Your prostitute and your child showed up, honey. Dang, good job. Good job. Or sugar mama, hey, it's a new world, you know. So, or did your perfectionist go on the date? You know, or it's interesting to ask, or in any relationship, ask yourself, what archetype am I relating through right now? It gets really interesting when you do that. But where was I? You got to parent yourself. Those that know how to parent themselves mystically can go anywhere in the world and feel like they're at home. Because you know you're not abandoning you. Most of us project away onto everyone else our parental needs through our child archetype, and then we blame them for abandonment. Where the hell were you? Right? So this is part of becoming a spiritually mature adult in my view. But it's also part of what Dark Nights will bring up. They're going to ask you, hey, how are you doing with your self-parenting? Because your child is freaking out. So imagine if the codependent is the only thing running most of your relationships, who's taking care of your child? You're not even there. You're busy out managing everyone else. And then your child freaks out, and what happens? You go deeper into your codependent strategies because now your system's freaking out, and it's in this groove of how it, as a kid, got to safety, security, and survival. And you're trying to, and next thing you know, your kids are like, stop controlling me. Your spouse is like, what is wrong with you? Or not. Maybe they like that you donate blood to them. So, you know, there's always another layer here that I want to mention real quick. I mean, we could go on and on. Hope you guys really will join me for this reflections I'm doing in September, because I'm going to go through a lot of these things, and I'm going to go section to section, because every dark night cycle will need a different archetypal crew. So you've got your 4 survival, but there's more. But you've got to check in with something I haven't talked about yet in the dark night cycle, and that is your Esteem-System. How do you get value? Because that will go through a new disintegration also. So the codependent gets value. How? By being needed. So I'm going to switch how I'm going to speak about the codependent. I'm going to call it a blood donor. So this is what people do with the vampire. Oh no, go away. Yes, yes, yes. Oh no, but oh, no, come. Oh, how'd you get in my house? I didn't invite you. Yes, I did. Come on, bye. Because, but the blood donor gets value by being needed for blood. So it needs a vampire. And then everyone who's done getting sucked dry is like, I hate being a blood donor. No, I don't. It gives me value. I hate being, what? So finally, the dark night comes. Why? Because you run out of blood. You don't have any blood to beat your own heart, your own creativity, grow your own cells, grow your own body of your life. So this is one example. But you've got to understand, like a technician, your own Esteem-System. What runs it? And to get to that, you will always need to have a conversation with your child. Because that's where we formed it. Does it make sense to everybody? Guys, I got to wrap it up as much as I'm kidding about midnight, but I know. So I want to do a little just group hug meditation, if you guys are open to it real quick. And yeah, you guys in? Little close it down, get ready for tomorrow. So just take a moment and close your eyes and let's go inside for a minute. A lot of questions and concepts and so take a moment and just take up your space. You belong here, you're supposed to be here. And start by just feeling everything in your body. Start at your feet, Just take your awareness and your breath throughout your whole entire body. And for a few moments, just be with you. Nothing to do but just kind of arrive back to yourself. So as you settle in, just begin to feel the energy of the room, of all the beautiful souls that came to this weekend with you. The shared space we're all holding together here. And I'm going to say a few things, and I just want your system to report in on whatever arises as I say these things. There's nothing to get right or wrong, it's just whatever happens. And just observe yourself. So I'm going to tell you that you are already enough. And just watch as I say you're already enough, what your system does. Do you find resistance somewhere? Do you find release, surrender somewhere? What happens? Just watch it. Get to know that response with curiosity, not judgment. Staying with your breath, take a few more deep breaths. And I'm just going to leave you with a fundamental truth about dark cycles, dark nights, chaos. You were born for a reason. Even chaos itself is divine order. Dark nights always release a brighter light. So if you've got something in your life that's got you on your knees right now, or got you afraid, or has you in darkness or in chaos, see what it can be like just to surrender. And know that you don't have to effort the next step. You just have to take it. All dark nights are doors to a new level of your potential, all of them. And it's not about getting to enough, you're already enough. It's about expressing all that you are already, with a little more luminosity. Let that come into your heart. And let that truth reverberate for the rest of this weekend and into the rest of your life. When you're ready in your own way, just kind of open your eyes and come back. Namaste, everybody. Thank you so much. It was fun.